I'm Molly Jong-Fast. Oh, thank you. I love cheering. I'll cheer. Let's cheer. Thank you. And this is Randi Weingarten. I'm so honored that I get to interview her. I'm such a fan, and also you've been through hell. But I want to start. We were just talking before, we were backstage, and we were talking about how important this election is. We're 400 days from this epic. I mean, let's talk for a minute before we talk about unions and teachers and the incredible victories unions have had. Let's talk for a minute about what the stakes are for this election.
Can you hear me? So first off, let me just say, I adore you. And last night I was just saying to Molly, I've been a little bit engaged, as have, I assume, many of us, in what's going on in the Middle East right now. And so I found lots of tremendous peace in reading all your last pieces, Molly, about Donald Trump last night. So I just want to say thank you for all of that. Look, I'm a recovering lawyer, and I'm still on leave as a social studies teacher from Clara Barton High School in Brooklyn, New York. Unpaid leave, by the way. So I see things in terms of what it means historically and what things mean in terms of what the country looks like, not only for kids, but for communities, and through a historical aperture. And this is going to be the most important election since 1860. It may actually be one of the most important elections since Washington made a decision that he was going to be a president, not a king. And I say that because if you watch how democracies have died in different places across the world, we are in the midst of that. And it's not just looking at, look at Hungary or look at Poland, but think about, and Ruth Ben-Ghiat will be on later, think about what she says in Strongman about the characteristics of an authoritarian. And so I think that there's a somberness with which we need to look at this and think about what we actually can do to actually elect someone, I would argue Joe Biden, who believes in democracy and democratic principles.
One of the things that is really, I think, plaguing America right now is inequality when it comes to income inequality. And that is one of the things that Trump really sort of, the populist movement pretended to care about. Unions are one of the answers to this problem. I want you to talk, because I feel like one of the incredible things about this tight labor market is we have had an opportunity, workers have had an opportunity for the first time in a long time to really be able to strike, and the Writers Guild is an incredible example of that. 100 days, they got everything they wanted. So can you talk to me about what the sort of dream of unions are and how it's coming to fruition?
Do you want the 2-minute version or the 5-hour version?
The 5-hour version. We got time. I don't think there's anything else today.
So the 2-minute version is really simplistic, but let me start with the 2-minute version, which is that in a capitalist society, and we are a democratic capitalist society, there are very few ways for workers to actually have enough power to have a better life for themselves and their families. And frankly, and I'm not opining about anything. I'm just factually saying that. And so in the 1930s in the United States, that was in some ways the beginning of the American labor movement. And there had been a craft movement in terms of George Meany and cigars and all that other stuff, but the industrial movement that UAW, and I'm using that on purpose, UAW in some ways started with the sit-down strikes in Detroit, was the start of the modern labor movement in terms of how you have enough power to actually have how you have enough bargaining power and then policy power so that working people can have a middle-class income. And you saw the ascendancy of the union movement in terms of the 30s, the 40s, tight labor market, right after the war, consumption society, and you saw that going up from the 40s, the 50s, the 60s. Separate and apart from that, corporate power did not like union power. And so you had from...
They still don't.
Oh my God, they hate it. So you had from the basic, look, that's part of why they attack me so much. You saw the 60, 70 years of whittling down of the policy power that we have had. How many college professors are here? I'll give you one example. College professors? Think about the yeshiva.
We can't see your hands, but
think about the yeshiva decision. Years ago, saying that a college professor no longer has the right to be collectively bargain. That hugely took out the knowledge economy from the labor movement. So now what's happening is, think about the Janus decision. All public employees are now, you can decide one day, even if your union has given you everything that you needed or wanted, you don't want to be a member of it. So what's happened right now is that with this huge inequality, meaning that basically 10% of America has 90% of the income. Two things have happened. One, Trump exploited this and exploited the grievance of globalization and of the whittling down of workers' power and dignity, and exploited it, wanting to do absolutely nothing about it. But this is the good news. People understand, particularly kids, 88% of young people believe that they should be in a union and unions should be available to them. There's a sense that the way in which to have economic power of dignity, middle-class income, is to actually join a union, and that is happening across the country. That is why we are winning these strikes, because we have public sentiment on our side, and because the people who are on strike are willing to do the sacrifice to do that. And in my union, we have now had 65 new units. That's never happened to us. 65 new units since January of people who have wanted to be in a union and have the kind of economic wherewithal to which they should be entitled. That may have been 4 minutes, sorry.
No, it was great. So unions are close to my heart, because even though I'm not a member of one because it's not available to me, and I would be if I could, my grandfather, Howard Fast, was very involved in unions and believed that they were really the secret to protecting working people. And I want to talk to you. I mean, I feel like what we've seen this year is like just tremendous victories. And I know a lot of people in the Writers Guild who now survive on their pensions, right? Survive, right? They get health care, they get money, and I want to talk to you about what's happening right now with the striking auto workers, because it's an incredible just collective power bargaining. Talk to me.
So you hear the auto workers. So let me shortcut this to say, the auto workers, kind of like, remember the public workers in the 70s in New York City, basically saved the city by saying that the pension funds could be used as a guarantor for city finances, as the city was about to go bankrupt and Ford would not do anything. Now, that was a very controversial decision for Gottbaum and Shanker to make, but they made it out of understanding that and they had to convince members, and members sacrificed mightily. and there were strikes and on and on and on. But what is happening in terms of the UAW is very similar to this, which is that in 2006, 7, and 8, as the American economy was really going downhill, the auto industry was going downhill. And if any of us remember really stupid statements like, oh, cars in America cost so much because of pensions. Like, we don't have all those workers actually gave into those pension systems for years and years and years. That was deferred wages. So instead of getting them up front, they put them into a pension. And how the hell do people live? Most people cannot live on Social Security. They lived on their defined benefit plans. And frankly, the defined benefit plans cost less and were more effective than the 401ks we all now have. I digress. But what happened was in 2008, they sacrificed mightily. Two-tier wage system, got rid of their COLAs, all of that, in exchange of getting the federal guarantees. So they gave up lots of stuff. And the auto industry in America really shrunk. Now, fast forward to 2023, during COVID, huge increase in the auto manufacturing. The CEOs and shareholders are doing very, very well. And the auto workers are basically saying, we sacrificed when we had to save our industry. What about us now? And that's what they're saying. And that's why they're on strike.
Yeah. And they're starting to win. We're already seeing. So talk to us about that.
So the second piece, just like with the Writers Guild, AI, EV, just transitions, we've never been good in America on having a just transition. So there's a huge transition in terms of what we do with the climate.
Right.
So the two things that are happening now is that they are trying to make sure that all this new EV manufacturing gets done by unionized plants instead of plants that are going to pay people $15 an hour instead of $30 an hour. Right. And so that was the win you just saw they have with GM committing to doing that.
Yeah.
Ford's negotiations, as I understand it, and I'm just doing public information, was going swimmingly until Ford refused to do what GM just did. So just transition is really important, and the two other things that are important is getting rid of the two-tiered wage system and having a middle-class income.
Right. And I want to point out, that's the only way we're going to get this. Like, what we've seen now is that companies will not, the thing I've been so just continually disappointed by is these companies making tons of money, using it for stock buybacks, using it for their investors. None of these people are like out of their goodness of their heart being like, we need to pay you a living wage.
No, I would say you can always find a company that's willing to do that. But we have to create the environment in America that a middle-class income is valued by policymakers across the spectrum. And I think what happened with the Trump tax cuts is that economically, it was a huge boom to shareholders, many of whom are now pensioners, but to shareholders and to corporate CEOs. There was no investment back into the work. Frankly, the investment back into the work, and this is part of what our challenge is in terms of how to explain it in a way that people hear it. One of the things you learn as a school teacher, it's not what's said, it's what's heard.
Right.
Because what Biden has done with industrial policy is that we actually are making things in America again. We are actually trying to create industrial muscle in America that is also one that has a transition to a better climate.
That's the little-known CHIPS Act.
CHIPS, IRA,
right.
Yeah. Yes. Even the Infrastructure Act was creating a lot more work, which is part of the reason we have a tight labor market.
Right. And the goal here was to really move manufacturing as much as possible back to America.
Particularly chips, because of the security and national security concerns. We can't, frankly, I mean, I know I'm starting to sound jingoistic, I don't mean to, but we really can't rely on China to do all of our chip manufacturing. That has to be in the United States.
Yeah. And what I think is really interesting about where you've had a really, like, I want to talk about you for a minute, and then we'll talk about solutions, but you've had a tough couple. I mean, I think all school teachers have really largely been targeted by the right. What's been so disappointing to me is I really did think, because I'm optimistic in a pathological way, that that this pandemic might bring us all together and might galvanize, America as a problem-solving country that puts, and instead people are just furious at each other. And the right has really led the charge on demonizing teachers and unions and teachers' unions, and you find yourself in the center of that. Please talk to us about that.
So, do you have a couch?
This is therapy.
So, look, it's been interesting to be, I've been in the public eye for a long time. I mean, truth is, I never actually wanted to be the president of either the UFT or the AFT. Yeah. I always liked being behind the scenes. Part of it was I was the first gay, openly gay labor leader, and I wondered what that would mean, and on and on. But what has happened in the last few years is I've watched what the smears do personally and professionally, and I am mad as hell about it, and the way in which that has now transformed me is I am a happy warrior about solutions. I am more hopeful today than I've ever been. I'm not optimistic, I'm not pessimistic, but I am hopeful, and I see this world as a race between fear and hope. And so the kind of 10 stages of this were, you could see, so we felt the confidence in terms of the AFT because we had a deep knowledge in health and safety, occupational health and safety. Then in April of 2020, we actually put the first report out. I'm saying this because I want to debunk this myth. We put the first report out about how to reopen schools safely. We did. Not DeVos, not Trump, not our bosses, we did. And so what happened was I got to be on TV a lot because nobody was saying anything. People were like, blah, 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 and what's going to happen, and on and on and on, and there's huge fear, and so many people who are dying, and any of us who were in New York, we heard a siren every other nanosecond. So we put this out. So we were trying to figure out, because we knew it was really important to open schools. So I was on TV a lot. And so then I became the target. But what happened, in terms of the right wing, this is the most important thing I can say. They hate public schools. Right. Not conservative parents. I'm talking about the DeVos types. Yeah. Hillsdale College. Yeah. And then they joined with people who were really scared. Look, a mom of a special ed kid whose kid can't wear a mask. So they're scared. They're like, stop with the masks already. So you take the agita and the anxiety that people had at COVID, which is that fear, and you combine it with a right wing who has wanted to kill public schools for years, take that money for vouchers, and you have the scenario we have. So don't believe me. Look at what Christopher Rufo said. He spoke at Hillsdale College, the Christian Nationalist College, right. And he said the way you get to universal vouchers is to create universal public school distrust. So book banning, CRT, that nobody teaches other than in college, all of this stuff was then visited on teachers, not just me, but teachers, and this is what it means. Kids need their teachers now. Kids need to be able to look at each other like Molly and I are looking at each other, instead of looking at the damn screens. We got a lot of stuff we need to do to deal with loneliness and learning loss and fear and all of that. And so teachers are completely on eggshells right now about what to do. And the great news is the New Republic just did a tour with us in terms of giving out books while others are banning books. There is a huge, and this is where I'll stop. The public is with us. They want public schools. They love teachers. They want us to teach honest history. They don't want the book bans. But part of what I said, I'll end where I started, which is I think we as a union not only should be supporting and fighting for, the tools and conditions that teachers need to have to work and to do a good job, but our North Star is every public school should be a place where parents want to send their kids, educators want to work, and kids thrive. And so what I'm doing this year is I'm focused on literacy. I'm focused on how we wrap services around schools, and I'm focused on making sure we have experiential learning in schools so that kids really want to come to school, and that high schools become a place where kids can learn about career tech ed or college so that they leave high school feeling ready for the world. Thank you.
That's why you're the head. Sorry. But it is, I think, I have 3 teenagers. They all went through the pandemic. It was, am I supposed to curse? Am I not supposed to curse? It was a shit show.
It was a shit show.
I mean, a shit show. Those kids were the experience was so traumatic for them. And and I know this is true for every kid I've talked to and parents. It's just been trauma.
It was what we have visited on our children and families by not handling this pandemic as best as we could is going to be one of the huge scars in America. And look, we did things that were wrong. Everybody did things that were wrong. No one knew what to do. But let's not forget, we had a Trump administration who cared far more about his political views and life than on keeping America safe and protected.
Yeah. And I think that's really the net of it. And that's what's really quite scary as we go into this election cycle, is that this guy is running again. Yeah. And he is going to be the nominee, and he is in it, and all the polling, and again, I think a lot of the polling is not real anymore, but it shows a real close race.
Yes. Look, I think we have to understand, the facts are really important, and what we're doing today is very important in terms of a factual template and a factual basis. But affinity and whose side are you on is going to be more important in terms of who wins this race in November 2024 than facts. I wish that was not true, but we actually have to, and this is what the stakes have to be believable to Americans, and I believe that Americans will rise up and do the right thing if we actually talk to people. But we have to meet them. I'm going to say another thing that I learned as a teacher. We have to meet people where they are, and remember, it's what's heard, not what's said.
Yeah.
And we have to focus on what is going to be in this race between hope and fear. Hope has less resonance than fear, but we are the hope squad, and we are the solution squad. And I believe, I'm around America a lot. I believe people really want a better life for themselves and their families. And I think that if we can talk to people and engage with people and not just be in our tribes, we will win this election. But it's going to take work from today on.